People who have actually had intimacy with a step relative. What was the aftermath? Subscribe for more. Story 1. Not me, but my older brother. For years, the story was, he got the clap from this older woman who took his virginity. A month ago, he told me the truth. He got the clap from our stepsister, who at one point tried to sleep with me too. Story 2. I had a co-worker who was sleeping with his stepsister. They were already in college when their parents met and got married, so they weren't raised together. Pretty sure it lasted a while, with both of them living in the same house. Eventually, one of the parents caught them, which led to the parents separating. Story 3. My friend was born from an affair. His mother, a married woman, had a child with a younger man. That man later married someone else and had a daughter. Years later, unaware of their shared bloodline, my friend and that daughter met, fell in love, and got married. They had a child who tragically passed away young. Then heartbreak struck again when his wife died as well. 15 years passed before his mother finally told him the truth. His wife had been his half-sister all along. She had known but kept it secret, fearing the fallout would shatter her own marriage. Story 4. My sister gave our stepbrother a blowjob on one end of our wraparound couch, with our grandmother asleep on the other end. Spoiler alert, she woke up. We had some messed up family dynamics. Edit. I've answered these in the comments, but for anyone who doesn't feel like scrolling, what happened when she woke up? My grandmom woke up mid-job, smacked my sister on the back of the head with her slipper. They sprung apart and ran away without saying a word. And the next morning, everyone just acted like nothing ever happened. As far as I know, my grandmother never said a word about it to anyone. Where was I? I was in bed, sneakily reading Aragon, and none the wiser, until my sister told me the next morning. I think these two instances perfectly encapsulate who we both were as a person, and still are, to be honest. Story 5. My husband's brother secretly dated their stepsister. Only my husband knew, and despite his warnings that it was a bad idea, his brother pursued the relationship anyway. Everything came to light when she unexpectedly got pregnant. Their mother was upset but ultimately supportive, willing to stand by their decision to be together and start a family. Their father, however, couldn't accept it. He pressured his daughter to get an abortion and end the relationship, but she refused. They stayed together and had the baby. A few years later, though, they both ended up cheating on each other, and the relationship fell apart. Now, family gatherings on my husband's side are beyond awkward. For context, they became step-siblings when she was 10 and he was 13, but they didn't start dating until she was 23. Story 6. My dad was secretly sleeping with my mom's sister, and now I have a couple of cousin brothers to show for it. Yes, Florida. Someone replied, "Oh dear." Story 7. Nothing dramatic. Our parents got married when we were already in our 20s. A few years later, we got drunk one night, hooked up, and went about our business. After that, we'd meet up every once in a while, but eventually it just fizzled out. No big fallout, no awkwardness. We're still cool. Fun while it lasted. 10 out of 10 would hit again. Story 8. A girl I worked with had, in my opinion, a pretty weird situation. Her dad was dating a woman, and she was dating that woman's son. All four of them lived under the same roof. Eventually, they broke up and things got toxic fast. They started bringing home random people just to make each other jealous. Imagine having to explain that to your date. Walking into a house where your ex, who is also your step-sibling, is trying to one-up you. Absolute chaos. Story 9. Our parents got remarried later in life when we were already grown adults. Since we were both only children, having siblings was a completely new experience. We wanted to make it work, for the family's sake at least. A few months after meeting, we decided to go out drinking to bond. She ended up crashing at my place. I offered to take the couch, but she insisted we share the bed, doing that classic feet-to-head sleeping arrangement. My drunk ass passed out instantly. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to find us spooning, with a very obvious problem. I panicked, trying to figure out how to move without waking her. Then, wiggle, wiggle. She pushed back against me. On instinct, I pressed forward, tap, tap, wiggle, wiggle, tap, tap. You can guess where that led. What started as a way to grow closer became very effective. We hooked up a few times a week for months. In between, we talked about everything. Fears, secrets, dreams. Just like siblings. Except for, well, you know. Friends even commented on how quickly we bonded. Turns out there's a shortcut for that. Eventually, we both started seeing other people. But instead of drifting apart, we realized we had genuinely fallen for each other. Now we're officially dating and trying to figure out how to break the news to our family. Might not be a problem for too much longer, though. Last time her dad walked into the living room where we were hanging out, well, first he knocked. Story 10. When we were early teens, I knew a guy who had a huge crush on a girl his family was close with. Their parents were church friends, so they saw each other often. He was completely smitten. Then tragedy struck. Her parents died in a car accident. His family had previously agreed to adopt her if anything ever happened. And just like that, the girl he had been in love with became his sister. His mom insisted he start calling her that, and no one in his family seemed to suspect the depth of his feelings. Or if they did, they pretended not to notice. But what they definitely didn't know, because they would have disowned him, was that by high school they were secretly sleeping together, almost every night. I lost touch with them before graduation, and to this day, I have no idea what happened to them. It drives me crazy wondering if they ever got caught, if they stayed together, or if life forced them apart. And before you ask, I've tried tracking them down, but with only his common first name and vague memories of the girls, it's like chasing ghosts. The only person who might know is my mom, but bringing up a random coworker from 15 years ago just to solve this mystery? Yeah, not exactly something I'm eager to do. Story 11. My parents used to be step-siblings. My mom was just 6 years old and my dad was 12 when my mom's mom married my dad's dad. But my dad primarily lived with his mom, so they didn't spend much time together growing up. My grandparents were married for 6 to 10 years, but eventually they divorced. Fast forward to when my mom was around 20 and my dad was 26, he asked her out. They've been married for over 35 years now. The truly complicated part is that I have an aunt who was born from the marriage of my maternal grandmother and paternal grandfather, meaning my parents share a half-sibling. But here's the thing. Since they're no longer step-siblings, it's a little less weird now. Also, just to clarify, this isn't just a Southern thing. There are plenty of other hillbilly states besides Alabama. My family's roots run deep in California, and my aunt, for whatever reason, ended up moving to a Southern state after she got married. I like to joke that the family kicked her out because she made the family tree even more complicated. Story 12. Well, we had sex 2 times. She got pregnant. We tried to work it out. It didn't go well. She left to a different state and then threatened to come get our daughter. I got a lawyer and filed for custody. She never responded, and I won by default. I haven't heard from her since my daughter was 8 months old. That was over 4 years ago now. Story 13. All right, here's the story. I meet this girl, meet her parents. We start dating, have sex, and things go well for several months. Then she gets pregnant, and I join the Navy to support my new family. I leave for boot camp, and while I'm gone, she starts sleeping around, so we break up. But here's where it gets wild. During this time, her mom goes off the deep end, and her dad ends up leaving her mom. Her dad then starts seeing my mom, and they get married. Boom! My ex is now my stepsister, and my son is now my nephew. Welcome to West Virginia, y'all. Story 14. My uncle married his stepsister when they were teenagers. They had 4 kids together, but then divorced. Years later, my dad married her. She was his stepsister and also his younger brother's ex-wife. My cousins became my step-siblings, and my uncle lived just around the corner. But things got tense. Her kids didn't like being told what to do by their uncle, and my dad always felt like she treated my sister and me poorly. My grandma even threatened to disown my dad multiple times for marrying her. They stayed together for about a year, but then things fell apart. Stepmom couldn't handle my dad's drinking anymore, and he got fed up with her kids disrespecting him and her not treating my sister and me well enough. We moved out, but they stayed married for over 10 years. After that, my cousins, my step-siblings, weren't as close with us, and my sister and I ended up being considered the black sheep of the family. It's a shame. I really liked being around my cousins, and I thought my aunt's stepmom was cool back then. I was around 10 or 11. I can't even imagine what my dad and my stepmom were thinking when they first got together. It was a confusing situation all around. Story 15, and I once had a colleague who, after getting drunk, confessed to having slept with her stepbrother. What started as a secret affair eventually grew into a serious relationship. Her parents found out and did everything they could to get them to break up, but she kept seeing him in secret. It became an open secret at the office, and it got awkward because her stepdad was also in upper management. Her parents found out again and tried to intervene, but the whole situation turned public, ugly, and really embarrassing for her mom and stepdad, who were both high-profile figures in their industry, running their own company. My colleague told us her mom had given her ultimatums, but she didn't go into detail. Then one day, she suddenly stopped coming to work and emailed her resignation, telling HR she was moving to the US to find some peace. She also texted some colleagues saying she was leaving because she'd had enough of the drama. Weeks went by with no word until her stepbrother, sharp boyfriend, started contacting people at work, desperately asking if anyone had seen or heard from her. He didn't believe she had actually left for the US and was convinced something was wrong. Most of us thought he was just a guy who couldn't handle the rejection. Then he went to the police and filed a missing persons report. To everyone's surprise, the police actually investigated. This doesn't usually happen in a developing country, but they made inquiries. Eventually, they dismissed the stepbrother as just a lovesick guy. For a while, everything calmed down. However, the stepbrother continued to go crazy, claiming something terrible had happened to her. He said he'd had a falling out with his parents over it. No one at work wanted to get involved, especially since her parents were well-known figures. The situation seemed to die down, but it wasn't over. Fast forward 2 years. No one had heard from her until the police came knocking. They had arrested her mother's chauffeur on an unrelated charge, and he confessed to murdering our colleague, even leading them to her body. He didn't reveal why he did it, but the police assumed he had been stalking her. It turned out that our colleague hadn't moved to the US. The emails and texts she'd sent weren't from her at all. They were sent after her death, and it became clear that her mother had been behind it. She had orchestrated the entire thing, sending the emails and texts to cover her tracks. Her mom had always had a strained relationship with her daughter. At social events, she'd even claimed to be her sister, though everyone knew it wasn't true. I think the biological father might have been involved somehow too, but the whole thing was just a huge mess. The motive behind the murder was clear in the end. Her daughter refused to stop dating her stepbrother and was planning to marry him. Sorry for the bad grammar. English isn't my first language, and I've forgotten some details. This entire situation was just a tragic and disturbing mess. If you like stories like these, please make sure to like and subscribe for more. If you have any opinions on these stories, let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope you all enjoyed today's story time, and I hope to hear from you all soon.